So phosphorus has an atomic number of 15. So it has 15 protons. We said typically protons and electrons will equal in order to cancel out the positive and negative charges. So it should have 15 electrons. And the protons plus the neutrons equal the mass. And in this case, the mass is rounded off to be 31. So if its mass is 31 and it has 15 protons, how many neutrons does it have? So I would say 31 minus 15 is 16, right? Okay, so that's that. Our agenda looks really busy because I just put everything on one slide. So we got our notebook, hopefully up to date. If you need to, you can update that later. We're going to go through the ecology levels of organization. So remember, we watched Bozeman video on Monday where he went atoms all the way to the biosphere. And then Monday we went and spent more time on atoms. Wednesday we spent more time on the human body. And then today we're going to spend time on the ecosystem, so ecology. So we're going to do some note taking. You want to have your split screen so that you can have the notes up. You have fill in the blank notes, but they're not exactly like follow along kind of notes. So I've built in some stops in the PowerPoint. So we'll do a couple slides, then we're going to stop and we're going to fill out some notes, which is kind of how you would take notes if you were you know, reading and taking notes. You should read it and then you put it in your own words. You summarize it, paraphrase it, whatever. So we're gonna build in the breaks there. So by the time we're done with the Zoom, you should have that worksheet completed and then you can just turn it in, okay? I'll talk about the flex later. So you'll remember we left off at the individual, the organism. So we went cells, tissues, organs, organ systems. Now we're going to talk about the individual, put those together to make up a community, add some abiotic factors, non-living things to get an ecosystem. Oh, I missed the population. And you put some ecosystems to get a biome, and you get biomes, and you put them together to get the biosphere. So we're going to take an assessment on Monday, and levels of organization. Tuesday, I lied, Tuesday. We're going to have a test on Tuesday next week, and levels of organizations will be part of it. So for each of these, you would want to recognize their basic description, but also the interrelationship between them and give examples or recognize examples. So we talked about the biosphere down at the bottom here, right? The whole globe that supports Earth. And then as we move up or down, we can break it down that the biosphere is made up of several different biomes. And then the biomes, I don't want that so big. Can I make this smaller? Why is it so gigantuan? So we take the biome and we break it down into a biosphere. Ecosystems, and then you take ecosystems and you break them down into communities, break those down into populations, break those down into individuals. So we want to know what each of those levels are. So every organism is an individual, right? And if they're all of the same kind, they're considered a species only if they can breed and produce fertile offspring. So the tiger has to breed with another tiger to produce the same species. If you bred the tiger with a lion, the offspring would not be able to produce more offspring. It wouldn't be fertile. So that new species or new organism would not be of the same species. A population is a group of those organisms. So if we went to Africa and we saw a whole bunch of gorillas in a forest, that group of gorillas would be a population. And we use this dichotomous, this is Carlos Linnaeus came up with our naming system, basically. So we can break this down. The Panthera tigris would be this specific name of this one type of species, right? So The genus is Panthera, so all similar tigers would be Pantheras. So the individual is defined as one living organism, and a group of them in the same area are referred to as a species, right? So all the black, I should go into populations when I say area, the geographic area. So all of like the black squirrels in our woods out back would be the population of black squirrels. Here we have, I believe these are elephants. So this is a population of elephants because they're living together in an area. They're interacting, they're working collaboratively, like a family, if you will. This is their breeding set. This is like the gene pool that they have to work with. So populations are geographically isolated and therefore reproductively isolated. So like these elephants aren't going to breed with elephants in another part of the world. Okay, so this is our first stop. I had your notes, but now I don't. In your Google Classroom, you already opened up this note sheet. The first paragraph, I'll tell you, you're just using population, species, and community, right? So how would you apply those to a school situation? So it's not straightforward. You do have to think about it a little bit and apply what we know. So take a moment to fill in your answers there. You're basically talking about your species, your population, and your community.
Okay.
Okay, so that first part may have been a little bit tricky. Containing students of the same, what do you think?
Species.
Yes. And then the next one, adjacent schools are organized into a school, might be the same as a community because there's different schools in the same area, like there's different populations in the same area would make up a community. And then is it an individual, a species, or a population? A single person.
It's an individual, yeah.
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to assume the next few were straightforward because they were definitions. Some species have very blank being limited to the top of a single mountain. So I'm going to use context clues for that one since I'm talking about the scale of the geographic area. It's referring to a single mountain, so I might say a small area or a small population. And then in the case of the particular population on the mountain may represent the entire community. So if they're the only few ones. And then in the third paragraph, this word wasn't there, but I think from background knowledge, if they have unfavorable conditions, what might happen to them? What do you think, Mindy? They might become, and then they give an example that the leopard in northeast China is an example because we don't see them anymore. So they've become extinct. Okay, so we're going to keep going. So we've done the individual, which makes up a population, which makes up a community. So now I don't just have the elephants. I have elephants and some other organisms. So when I compare the picture, I have now some trees and grasses, and I don't know, kids last hour thought maybe that was impalas. So, so now we have a community because we have multiple populations. There's many different types of species. So many different types of species must be interacting together. They form a food web, they form a predator-prey relationship, they have, they provide homes for others, they have symbiotic relationships. So some examples of communities would be the forest, because you got the trees and the animals that live there. You have a pond, so you have all the fishes that live together and the algae, the coral reef, the reef itself, plus the clams and the fish and the octopus and all different animals that are living together. So those are all examples of communities. So communities are many populations. When I add in the non-living part, so in this case, there's nutrients in the water itself is non-living, there's a certain temperature, all of that makes up the abiotic factors. So the abiotic and the biotic together make up an ecosystem. So bio means life. So you have the biotic components, the duck, the fish, the algae, the water lily, the frogs. And then you have the abiotic factors, the nutrients in the soil, there's phosphorus, nitrogen, all kinds of things in the water itself, the temperature of the water, the amount of sunlight it gets, all that is abiotic. Okay, so we had a species that makes up a population that goes together to make up a community, and the community makes up an ecosystem. So we're going to take a pause and we're going to fill out page 2. So you're using words related to the ecosystem and to the community. And all of these, I would say, are right on the slides except for the last 2. So on this one, the only ones you didn't have were the last 2. So talking about different temperatures and rainfall. So for example, changes in temperature and rainfall affect terrestrial habitats differently. Some species can survive in very blank desert habitats. So referring to water levels and such, some species can survive in very wet deserts. Because it's referring to rainfall, I might go with something related to the water levels. So if it's hot, it's probably also dry. While others need higher amounts of rainfall, commonly found in, where would I find a lot of rain?
Maybe in a rainforest?
Yes, that's a great answer. Okay. So we've made species into populations, into communities, ecosystems, and now we put a bunch of ecosystems together and we'll have a biome. So across the world, you can see there's lots of different biomes. These are terrestrial, meaning found on land specifically. But there's also water or aquatic biomes. So distinct geographical areas. So several different communities, several different ecosystems, all in a big area that has the same basic stresses, right? So because they're found along the equator, they have the same amount of rainfall, they have the same temperatures. So it's going to be in a large geographic region because of that. Up here, you're way away from the equator. You don't get a whole lot of sun during the year. You're very cold. So those abiotic factors really determine the characteristic of the entire biome. So they have a common environment. They'll have certain types of plants and animals, like only certain animals will you find in the Arctic, right? Only certain types of animals will you find where it's nice and hot. The main terrestrial biomes are tundra. That would be this one here, where they have permafrost that never, like the ground never thaws. The forests, which might be deciduous forests like we have here, coniferous forests, or the tropical rainforest. And then you have grasslands like you're going to see in Africa, for example. So those are the main terrestrial biomes. So biome is a big geographic region with the same environment, basically. And then put all those biomes together, they make up the whole Earth, right? So a globe, they make up the entire ecosystem. So it includes all regions of the Earth and the atmosphere that supports life. So if we go high enough into our atmosphere, we no longer will be able to exchange gases, right? There's too much pressure on our body. So at that point, we've left the biosphere. So it's only that we can live within. And that would include the soils, right? Because we have all our bacteria and things like that live down a ways, volcanic vents, things like that. So all the biomes where you can find the human populations, for example, is the biosphere. So we just have 3 little blanks for this one, page 3. Oh, I lied. There's 5 blanks. They're all found on the notes in the slide set. So you should be able to come up with those pretty easily. So biomes have formed it due to a common environment. They have certain types of plants and animals. You have the tundra, the forest, and the grasslands. Sum total of all ecosystems. Supports life. So on that same page of your notes, page 3, I want you to write down numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I'm going to ask you 4 questions. You're going to use your levels of organizations. Going to give you a what just happened? Okay. So levels of organizations, I'm going to give you a description. You identify which level it is. So we got the plants, the animals, and the microbes inhabiting a forest. So is it a biosphere, an ecosystem, an individual, species, population, community, plants, animals, and microbes inhabiting the forest? Include their relationships and the abiotic factors for number 2. You have a group of birds like the cardinals living in a particular forest, like out back of the high school. And number 4, areas over a number of continents which have the same abiotic factors and distinct biological communities. Number of continents, not just found here in the United States. Okay, so what do you think for number 1, Jonathan? Plants, animals, and microbes.
Is it community?
It is. Very good.
Okay.
Okay, go to another page of people. Number 2, we added in the abiotic factors. What do you think about that, Gabby?
I'm not really sure.
Okay, so if we have the living and the non-living things together, the interrelationship, how they affect each other, that's going to make up an ecosystem. Just one single group of birds of the same kind. What do you think, Ariana? If they are of the same species, there's a group of them in one area, what will we call them?
I'm not sure.
Okay. So if it's any one type of species, we have a population. If there were several different species, it would be a community, but only one species is a population. And if I put all of the ecosystems and I went across biome, or the answer is biomes. If I went geographically and said that these ecosystems are found in several continents, I would be looking at a biome. Oh, I see. I accidentally enlarged my screen. That's why. Okay, so we're going to want to practice those. What I want you to do here, I'm going to give us 5 minutes, and I want you to try to grab 6 images of your favorite organism. And I was just trying to do this while you guys were doing something. So if your favorite organism is the frog, this is like a very simplistic example. You're going to grab a picture of a single frog and then make it a population of frogs, a group of the same frogs together. Then put that frog in its own ecosystem. So where would you typically find that frog? Include living and non-living things. And then I'm going to put that into a biome. So if this frog lives in this pond, where would I typically find that pond? The biome is the larger geographical area. And then, of course, the frog can be found on the entire earth. Okay? So this is going to go on turn your note page to page 4. They gave you a very simple example on page 4. So under their example, I want you to create one with your favorite animal. Okay? So I'm going to put 5 minutes on and see if we can do it in 5 minutes. Looks like you guys are pretty well set. So we're going to do one more activity together, and then you're going to turn this into Google Classroom. So the last thing for class time, you in Google Classroom already opened up all of the documents linked to today. We're going to do some practice, and this is going to be in our breakout room. And it sounded like, as I was calling on people, that maybe a conversation about these levels of organization could be helpful. So we're looking for individuals or organisms, species, populations, communities, ecosystems, biospheres, biomes. So in your breakout rooms, we have, so grab that grid, you're going to highlight the correct answer. I'm going to repeat that. You're going to highlight the correct answer, okay? So I am going to stop sharing the screen. Everybody sees the document you need up. Remember, when we do breakout rooms, you got to have your cameras on. Otherwise, one person's in a room all by themselves. Voices on, cameras on, okay? So you're going into a room. It'll take you a couple minutes to discuss those levels, and then we'll pull you back. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example, family of squirrels. So family of squirrels, all the same species, right? They're living in the same area. So that makes up a population. So anywhere you had a single species in an area is a population. The pond includes both abiotic and biotic because it's the water, it's the nutrients, it's all the organisms that live there. Since I included the non-living component, it makes it an ecosystem. So any that had both living and non-living, ecosystem. The globe is the whole sphere, right? So that's my biosphere. In this one, we have different types of organisms, and here we have different types of organisms. Both of these, because they're different organisms in an area, they're a community. And then you had a single organism here. So that was an organism. So the pack of hyenas, same kind, so they're a population. Here, these fish, same kind, they're a population. The farmyard could be tricky, I think, because I'm talking about an area, and ecosystems typically have like a distinct boundary, so you know when you're outside of the farmyard, right? I think this is going to be an ecosystem because it's not referring to the individual organisms, but I believe this would include the non-living component of the farmyard. And then I can't tell what this is. Living things. I'd forget what it says. Rainforest. Okay, so that's a biome. And then we did the rest of them. Okay, so any you have questions on, want to clarify my choice?
Wait, actually, one question. The like second row all the way to the right with like the fish and plants. Mm-hmm. Why would that be an a community instead of an ecosystem?
This isn't showing me any of the non-living part of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if it put it in the water or included some rocks, then it would be ecosystem. But it's
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Okay, so I'm switching back to our agenda. What do we have left? So, whoa, I hate when that happens. If you finished the notes that we took together and you finished highlighting your answers on that grid, you're ready to turn that in. So you're going to turn that in and you're done, and I'm going to put points in right now. If you need to work on it, keep working on it and then turn it in. Today's flex time, so our next hour, we're going to be working on the graph of the week. It probably won't take you a whole hour, but we have a current event video. So right now there's a lot of forest fires going on over in California, right? So we hear a lot about those on the news. We're going to go over to Australia. So the news clip that you're going to see, I forget if it was earlier this week. No, I think it was last week. So you're going to watch that video and you can think about the whole ecosystem and how it's affected by this wildfire, and then complete the graph of the week. This one has 2 pages. The last one you did only had 1 page. So make sure you keep going. Don't stop where you did last time. We have a test, quiz, quest, whatever you want to call it. We have an assessment on Tuesday. We get together on Tuesday over Unit 1. The things we talked about in this unit were scientific method, and we paid a little more time and focused on graphing, hypotheses, and variables. We also talked about the 8 characteristics of life, and within that, we spent more time on homeostasis and more time on the levels of organization. So under the levels of organization, we spent time talking about atoms, the human body level, and the ecological organization, right? So for all of those, you should recognize examples, be able to recognize their definitions, make it like a useful knowledge, right? So if I gave you an example of a scientific process, you would be able to identify where observations were being made or where data was being collected. So examples like that. Okay, so I'm going to be getting your grades up to date. Come Monday, I won't be accepting any more work. So anything you have missing, you want to go through your Google Classroom and get that caught up, okay?